Hey, Tuna here. Hope everyone had fun with the golden rotation on spawning grounds. Today, we'll go through each Grizzco weapon from the simplest to the most complex. Each section will provide a general overview, weapon-specific tips, and a short clip of gameplay. This video will be on the longer side, so please feel free to skip around as you need to. First, I want to sort the Grizzco weapons into easy, medium, and hard. What I mean by that is, how punishing is it to get this weapon when you're not that sure how to use it? In easy, I'd put Brella, Blaster, then Charger. These weapons are straightforward, and they don't have any complicated gimmicks. In medium, we're gonna go with Roller, Dualies, and Stringer. These weapons have some unique abilities, but overall they're forgiving if you're not that familiar with them. And in hard, we're gonna go with Splatana and Slosher. These two are the most complicated of the bunch, and not knowing how to use these makes them feel kinda clunky and slow. With that out the way, let's begin. First up, the Grizzco Brella. The Brella has a standard range and no canopy. It has a high fire rate and strafing speed, making it very mobile. It should be treated similar to a shooter weapon. Use the Brella in a more supportive role, like a Splattershot Jr., focusing on lessers, painting, and easy bosses. You want to be more cautious when fighting the Big Shot and Steelhead, as you're more prone to getting swarmed while distracted. Going into some tips. Number 1. Brellas shoot out multiple pellets of paint per shot. That's a mouthful, but you can shoot above the salmon and allow the pellets to fall on top of them for AoE damage instead of only hitting the first salmon. A good example of this is during blowflies. Finding a good angle without shooting the backs of your teammates can often be a struggle. With this Brella, you can comfortably arch your shots over the front lines. Now, if you're focusing a single enemy, feel free to just fire straight on. I'd also like to note that the damage per pellet with the Grizzco Brella is lower than the Splat and Tentabrella, making this specific technique a little bit less impactful. Number 2. Due to the high strafe speed, you can oftentimes just keep shooting while walking away instead of swimming away. This will keep your DPS up and allow you to fight up close with confidence. Next, we have the Grizzco Blaster. The Blaster's range is on the shorter side. It has an extremely high fire rate and a decent blast radius, making it very good at crowd control. The Blaster is similar to the Brella, but it is slightly better at clearing salmon, with the trade-off of being a slightly worse painter. Use the Blaster in a more supportive role, focusing on lessers, painting, and easy bosses. Again, like the Brella, take care not to get down when fighting the Big Shot or the Steelhead. While you do shoot very fast, you do less damage than you think. This might give the salmon just enough time to close in on you. Going into tips, number 1. While you likely won't be using the blaster hopping tech in the same way as with the other blasters, you'll still be jumping a lot to extend the Grizzco Blaster's range to reach things like fish sticks and steelheads. Number 2. The range is a bit shorter than standard, and the blast can really block your vision. Make sure you're close enough to hit your target. Listening for that hit sound cue can help a lot. Number 3. While it shoots very fast, it's still a blaster, so remember that you can hit targets that you don't have direct line of sight of with the blast radius. This is especially great for steelheads. And the final weapon in the easy group, the Grizzco charger. The charger has a long range. It packs some serious damage and no charge time, making it one of the best weapons against bosses. However, it's the first weapon on this list that's noticeably incongruous. Use the charger to focus on bosses since it has an incredible range, penetration, and high DPS. When needed, don't be afraid to take advantage of your range and penetration to help clear lessers or revive a teammate that's far away. Going into tips. Number 1. From a full tank, you'll only get about 7 shots before needing to refill. Make sure you always know when you need to re-up just in case you need to make a quick getaway. Number 2. The charger fires so fast that your reticle probably won't show up. It's easy to empty the entire ink tank with your aim just slightly off. If you're aiming at a small target like a slamming lid, I think it's worth taking the extra half a second to hold the right trigger down and aim with the reticle. I did a test in the training room, and of course, while it is faster to just fire away, you're not losing that much time by lining up each shot. Number 3. Each shot does 200 damage, so know exactly how many shots you need to take down high priority bosses. That's going to be 2 for steelheads, and 3 for just about everything else. Number 4. While the charger doesn't have any armor penetration, it's still a good weapon for taking out flip-floppers while they're in the air. It's expensive at about 5 to 6 shots, but if you have no other bosses to attack, or if your team is quickly running out of turf, blasting the flip-flopper can be a good idea. Number 5. Remember, the Grizzco charger can penetrate through multiple salmonids with just one shot, unlike the regular bamboozler. This can be used to easily clear a line of lessers. Number 6. Even though this weapon is focused on bosses, remember to help out your teammates by painting the fish sticks, reviving, and clearing lessers when needed. Our first weapon of the medium group, the Grizzco roller. The roller is incredibly fast and surprisingly ink efficient. The Grizzco roller can run through all of the salmonids in just a few hits, giving it an exceptional ground game. It has a massive vertical flick to take care of steelheads, though that startup animation is equally as long. Use the roller to collect eggs in a pinch, paint, manage lessers, and clear any bosses that you can reach from the floor. I would save the vertical flicks for just steelheads, drizzlers, and painting a wall or fish stick if needed. Going into tips. Number 1. This is the best weapon to quickly clear lessers off the map. Take a lap, clear the shore, collect an egg, and rescue your teammates all in one go. Number 2. If your timing is right, you can roll over the maws and the flip-flopper when they're exposed on the ground, though there's nothing wrong with fighting them the traditional way. Number 3. For steelheads, you'll want to practice the timing and the distance of the vertical flick. The range for the flick is really long, like really long. So don't feel like you have to get that close to the steelheads, especially since the flick startup animation leaves you vulnerable. I like to start my windup at the same time that the steelhead charges the balloon, but practice and find the timing that works best for you. Number 4. The roller is so fast that you can use it like a brush to quickly carry eggs to the basket. This is mainly if the salmonids have already swarmed the eggs and you need a safe way to cart them in. Otherwise, either tossing them or substrafing are equally viable options. Next up, the Grizzco Dualies. The Dualies are a fast, explosive weapon. It's very mobile with lots of ink output and bomb properties, though it suffers from short range outside of turret mode. Use the Dualies to paint the floor, manage lessers, and clear bosses that you can reach. While the bomb roll may be the most obvious attack mode, the turret mode still has its place. So remember to use it when you need that extra bit of range, or if you're worried about rolling into trouble. Going into tips, and well, speaking of trouble, number 1, always be aware of your surroundings and try not to roll into a bad situation. This is especially important near the shore when multiple big shots or flip-floppers are camping the basket. Number 2, you can clear a fish stick in just one go by bomb rolling off the top. Simply use the turret mode to paint the side of the stick, climb it, and then roll off. If you find yourself leaving, 1 or 2 small fries, you can try being more towards one edge of the stick and then bomb rolling the other way. This ensures that the blast is as centered as can be. Number 3, you can use the bomb roll to easily clear a stinger at shore while managing lessers. I know sometimes we try to clear a stinger and we turn around and there's a bunch of chums or cohawks in the way. Bomb rolling ensures that you're managing any salmon that may be near you and taking out the stinger at the same time. Number 4, you can use the bomb roll to easily flip the flip-flopper circle. Number 5, you can clear a fly fish by bomb rolling around the top of its basket. This can be a bit tricky, as once you start rolling, you quickly lose altitude, and you might be too low to hit the fly fish. Even if, in the end, you only get one basket, that's still really good, and a lot more ink efficient than using 2 splat bombs. And the last of the medium group, the Grizzco Stringer. The Grizzco Stringer is a tri-stringer with 9 bolts instead of 3. It can put out high amounts of paint and damage, but its effective range might take a second to get used to. As you charge the stringer, the bolts come closer together. Since there's so many of them, they're still spread out unless you're almost at point blank range. To get the maximum single target damage, get up close to ensure that all the bolts hit the same target. And to get better crowd control, be further back so that the bolts have time to spread out and disperse the damage. Use the stringer to paint the floor, manage lessers, and quickly clear high HP bosses. Because of the way the bolts work, you'll need to be much more mobile with the Grizzco compared to how you'd play the Tri-Stringer. Get up close and personal when taking on big shots or scrappers, and leave the range shots for lessers and steelheads. Going into tips, number 1. The stringer's charge has 2 circles. As you charge your shot, the bolts will get closer together with increased range. At the first circle, the bolts will gain a detonate effect after landing for additional paint and damage. And at the second circle, the bolts have reached their maximum range and closeness. Number 2. Use the first circle to do widespread damage to lessers, and the second for a high-powered shot to bosses. Remember to get close enough to use all of the bolts on high HP bosses. Things like the Scrapper, the Drizzler, the Big Shot. Number 3. For stingers, remember to do a vertical shot to clear faster. Number 4. For steelheads, you'll need at least 2 bolts to one-shot a steelhead. Use the group of bolts either to the left or the right of the reticle instead of the dead center, since there's actually closer groupings on the sides than in the middle. Before we get into the last 2 weapons, I want to go over their armor penetrating traits. Both weapons can ignore the armor that some Samnids have. You can just attack the body of the falling bosses and skip their weak spots altogether. The Drizzler, Flip-Flopper, Flyfish, Scrapper, Steelhead, and Griller. It's important to remember you still need to attack the body of the fish though. A good example that I feel like trips a lot of people up is the Flyfish. You're going to want to hit the small fry pilot in the sphere and not the baskets. First up, the Grizzco Splatana. The Splatana is a stamper with only melee attacks. Despite the limited range, it has fantastic damage and good ink efficiency. You can either tap to safely chop away at lessers and bosses, or charge for a slash that will take out any non-pink Salmonid in just one blow. The charge slash can be performed either standing, jumping, or dashing. Use the Splatana to quickly clear lessers and armored bosses, especially the steelheads, drizzlers, and flyfish. Because of the high damage and ink efficiency, the Splatana is a weapon that can take on more risks during the wave, as you'll be able to easily get out of tough situations, like the roller and the dualies. Going into tips, number 1, you can main strafe when cutting through salmon ink to move faster and clear some lessers. Number 2, the hitbox for the charge slash may be kinda confusing at first. I recommend taking some time in the training room to get used to the range when standing in front of a boss and when dashing. Under or overshooting the distance will cause the attack to miss. Number 3, practice the timing of your charge slash to avoid awkwardly waiting for the target. During the charge phase, your strafing speed plummets, so don't start too early. Number 4, Be careful charge dashing into scrappers and steel eels, as they may still splat you on impact. Number 5. You can one-shot the Moz when it appears instead of throwing a bomb. Personally, I don't do this very often, as I'd rather just throw the bomb instead of waiting, but this is an option that costs less ink, especially if your timing is convenient. Number 6. If you can't reach the fly fish from the floor, try jumping or dashing off a ledge. When you dash off a ledge, you're going to maintain the same height for almost the entire dash. Number 8. You can hit a flip-flopper when it peeks its head out of the floor. You can also hit it when it's in the air, but for me, this is a little bit too risky to go for regularly. And our last Grizzco weapon, the Grizzco Slosher. The Slosher is my favorite Grizzco weapon. It has a long range with a shot that falls straight down at the end. Each shot has two parts, a main shot and a swirl that does damage as it penetrates through the salmonids. The Slosher, in my opinion, is only limited by its long startup time and ink hungriness. Use the Slosher as the ultimate boss and lesser cleanup weapon. Because it has salmon and armor penetrating properties, you can safely fire shots down rows of salmon to quickly clear the map. I recommend staying relatively close to the basket, as this weapon is very vulnerable to getting swarmed. Going into tips. Number 1. From a full tank, you'll only get 4 shots before needing to refill. I highly recommend counting to keep track of your ink tank, since the Slosher makes you go through the entire startup animation before letting you know that you're low on ink. Number 2. Practice the Slosher's startup timing. The Slosher is a little peculiar in 2 ways. It has an unusual delay, and the shot itself travels at a very slow speed, which can make your aim be slightly off. This is especially apparent when reviving teammates who are often moving or jumping. If you're having trouble with reviving teammates, I recommend using your Splat Bomb instead for more consistent results. Number 3. The Slosher is actually not bad at painting the floor and outputs a large circle like a flip-flopper. However, when it comes to walls, it paints similar to a charger. Number 4. You can flip the flip-flopper circle in just one shot by aiming at the center. While you might not stick around to clear the flip-flopper after it gets stuck, flipping the circle for your teammates can be a big help. Number 5. You can easily clear a fish stick in just 1 or 2 shots without ever leaving the ground. While it's possible to do it in just 1 shot, I like to send 2 just to ensure that the stick is cleared. Number 6. You can use the armor penetration properties to shoot through the steel eel and slamming lid. With the eel, this means you can just shoot down its body and catch the lessers that pass along its side. And shooting at the lid from the bottom lets us safely take it out from a distance. Number 7. You can take out the flyfish in just 1 shot by aiming at the small fry pilot. Remember, the flyfish likes to reposition after each attack, so try to wait for an easy shot if it's still wiggling around. Number 8. Steelheads will either take 1 shot to the balloon or 2 to the body. I usually just like to shoot at the body because it clears lessers at the same time. Number 9. You can take out a drizzler in either 2 or 3 shots. It'll be 3 if the drizzler is covered up the entire time, but it'll be 2 if the drizzler flips over for your second shot. If it's close to flipping over, I think it's worthwhile to wait and save some ink. Number 10. You can take out the stinger in just one shot. Now, I find this a little bit hard to execute in real games, and it often puts you in a compromising position. So please don't feel like you have to get all the stingers just because you can. There are plenty of weapons that can get the stingers without being as slow as the Slosher. I think the best time for when the Slosher should prioritize the stinger would be during high tide. How many times have you played through high tide only to have an army of lessers block you from clearing a flyfish or a stinger that's really only 5 feet away? This would be the best time for the Slosher to quickly address the shore bosses, because a small map means that the Slosher doesn't have to travel very far. And the penetration plus shot angle means that the hordes of lessers won't interfere. To recap, here's a quick overview of what each Grizzco weapon strengths are. Please remember that all weapons can do everything. All of them can boss kill, clear lessers, collect eggs, and paint. So always adapt to your team and to the game. The tags that I placed for each weapon is just what I think are their most standout traits. The Brella and the Blaster are your tried and true supports. Great at painting, mobile, and ink efficient. The Roller, Dualies, and Stringer are flexible weapons that can be more support or boss focused, depending on the game. And the Charger, Splatana, and Slosher are your boss killers with traits that let them handle lessers even though they can't really paint. And that's all, folks. Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please send them my way. Tuna out.